and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
The office of Speaker of the House is hereby declared vacant.
Kevin McCarthy is ousted as Speaker. Our Spotlight Politics team on what comes next.
No one and nowhere is immune.
And what's driving an increase in hate crimes in Illinois. And now to some of today's top stories. The Chicago Police Department has been abusing its authority to stop and search residents of the city, stoking fear and diminishing trust. That's according to a new report from the independent monitor of the Chicago Police Department's consent decree. The 39-page report details feedback received from 400 Chicagoans on the practice often known as stop and frisk. The report also named 8 recommendations for CPD, including officer training. But the CPD responded that all of the changes recommended were already required by the consent decree. The American Civil Liberties Union criticized the department's response, saying it demonstrates the department doesn't value community input. For more on this story, including the full report, please visit our website. Residents on the west side are sounding off on a plan that would turn the Amundsen Park Fieldhouse into a migrant shelter. A community meeting is set to kick off tonight at 6 at the Fieldhouse in Galewood. Members of the Amundsen Park Advisory Council and area residents held a news conference ahead of tonight's meeting to voice their frustration.
The immigrants, which I feel very bad for, they've been a part of this plan. Our elected officials have not had a plan in place for them, and they're using us as an scapegoat, and that leaves us here. It makes us look like the bad guy. We're not the bad guy in this.
And we are not anti-immigrants. No. But what we don't understand, and what they don't understand, you cannot keep bringing immigrants in. The city does not have the money.
Right.
It's gonna. We are the ones that are going to suffer for this for years.
The city's plan would reportedly be to house 200 migrants at the Fieldhouse for at least 6 months. The University of Chicago wants to make it easier for anyone to access the more than 1,500 books banned from libraries across the country.
Books are more than containers of text or sources of inspiration or enjoyment. They are a symbol for knowledge and its impact on society. In a similar way, libraries are more than just containers of books. They are a symbol for progress and a promise of a space where we all can get lost in thought.
To kick off Banned Books Week, Governor Pritzker joined the university in announcing the effort to build a comprehensive collection of the books at 3 university libraries, which are open to the public. The effort will also expand digital access to the books through the Digital Public Library of America. UChicago Library says it already owns about 25% of the 1,500 banned books. And Bally's made it official today, cutting the ribbon on its new temporary casino at the Medina Temple in River North.
When we took on the challenge of building a casino right here in a 100-year-old plus historic building, we understood what that meant. We knew that a lot of people here used to go have graduations and go to the circus here. And we were coming from the outside, and we wanted to make sure that we blended in well to what the community knew this building to be.
The chairman of Bally's joked that this is the opening of the city's first legal casino. It opened last month, but the mayor and others were on hand for today's official ribbon cutting. The permanent Riverfront Casino is slated to open in 2026. Up next, a growing number of hate crimes in Illinois, right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
There's hate in the Prairie State. That's according to a new report from the Anti-Defamation League. That report shows hate crimes and extremism have sharply increased in Illinois since 2021. Anti-Semitism alone increasing 128% between 2021 and 2022. Joining us to talk about the report is David Goldenberg, Midwest Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League. David, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So in the report, you detail, as we mentioned, anti-Semitic incidents up 128%, white supremacist propaganda distribution up 111% since 2021, hate crimes up 80% since 2020. What does all this tell you?
It tells us that Illinois isn't immune to these increases in hate and extremism. I think many of us think we live in this state, we're in a safe space, we aren't banning books here in the state, we're not sort of having questions about critical race theory, right? We think these issues are put to bed, but the reality is right here in Illinois, right here in northeastern Illinois, we are dealing with acts of hate and extremism.
Why or how does Illinois compare to other states?
Look, in some areas, we're better off, right? In some other areas, we're not doing so well. In anti-Semitism, you gave that one statistic. If we go back just a few extra years, back to 2016, it's a 430% increase in anti-Semitic incidents just back to 2016. We're at a 20-year high when it comes to hate crimes here in Illinois, but also across the country. And so there are some areas where we're doing better, but there's a lot of other areas where we've got a lot of work to do.
So here's what the leader of the Chinese American Service League had to say on this report today.
It is sad that no underrepresented community have been completely safe from the impact of hate. This report reminds us that this, and helping us recognize where hate is and how it manifests and spreads. When it comes to fighting hate, it truly takes a village, and we at Castle knows how much work goes into it.
David, how will this report support other organizations that are also fighting inequality and extremism?
Absolutely. Look, today, with our news conference that we had with the Attorney General, with the City of Chicago, with other state officials, we also had nearly 10 community organizations representing those communities that have been targeted most by extremists and extremist ideologies. Not only did you have representatives of the Jewish community, the AAPI community, the Black community, the LGBTQ plus community, but we also had women's health organizations who are participating in this too. Because the data is important, but it doesn't tell that whole picture. It doesn't talk about extremists and law enforcement. The data doesn't talk about the targeting of women's health facilities. It doesn't talk about other organizations using public entities to spread transphobia, homophobia, and anti-Semitism.
What do you think is driving this increase?
There's several things, but first and foremost, when you look at technology, when you look at social media platforms that actually have business models that profit off of hate, they have algorithms that direct people toward hateful content and hateful ideologies. You also have the current political environment. This idea that things that politicians or elected officials would have said 10 years ago would have disqualified them for office. Now they get a 5 to 10 point jump in the polls. And then lastly, when you think about what we've got, the risks to our democracy, thinking back to the insurrection and others, when you have people who have that ability or see success in sowing doubt in democracy, that's when you see these hateful ideologies coming out and people are able to grasp onto them, and that's incredibly dangerous.
How much of this is a matter of people reporting these incidents more compared to just the supremacists becoming more unabashed?
So I think it's both, right? Certainly the more and more you have stories like this one, the more and more news stories that people see in the newspapers and on the news of reports that are coming out there, reporting begets reporting. They feel more comfortable, they know where to go. But the reality is, though, is we're just having more incidents.
Report talks about this 111% increase in white supremacist propaganda distribution.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So this has to do with flyering. We've seen lots of reports over time where communities and individuals wake up in the morning and they have a flyer on their lawn of white supremacist or anti-Semitic propaganda. It includes also stickers that are put often. We see on college campuses a lot, white supremacist propaganda, like in the form of stickers that goes up on a telephone pole or something like that. So those are the types of things that we're seeing as it relates to propaganda.
You also mentioned, women's productive health advocates and what they're seeing. Illinois has been considered a safe haven for abortions, but obviously you all are still reporting, acts of terrorism terrorism and vandalism on clinics. What have some of the providers been seeing or experiencing?
As we heard today from Planned Parenthood of Illinois about the threats, whether it be vandalism, whether it be actual acts of terrorism directed toward these facilities. So while our state may be a safe haven when it comes to reproductive rights, it also then becomes a target of those who would seek to take those rights away.
A director from Equality Illinois also joined you all to speak about this report today. Here's a look at what he said.
LGBTQ+ communities are resilient. We will continue to build our own better world in the face of bias and violence with our allies behind us. We also need our allies in government right there with us. And we appreciate the leadership of the Attorney General, Secretary of State Giannoulias fighting book bans, Governor Pritzker, but we need public officials at all levels of government to show up and speak up in solidarity.
Specifically, what would you like to see public officials do?
Well, first, one of the things that we saw today was several public officials speaking out and showing strength with communities. We're fortunate here in Illinois in many ways, is that we have a state government, we have local officials who don't really need a whole lot of convincing that we've got a problem here. The conversations we have here in Illinois, very different than other parts of the Midwest. So what we'd like to see them do is, number one, let's create a comprehensive strategy to address domestic terrorism and domestic extremism here in the state of Illinois. When it comes to hate crimes, we need better reporting of hate crimes. That means law enforcement has to be fully trained and better trained, and we don't mandate it right now in the state of Illinois. We'd like to see law enforcement mandated to take hate crimes training. And then also we want to create better mechanisms and tools through which victims of hate crimes and hate incidents can report those hate crimes where they might not necessarily feel comfortable going to law enforcement.
Okay, a lot of work, it sounds like. David Goldenberg, ADL Midwest. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, our Spotlight Politics team and a historic shakeup in Washington, D.C. Stay with us. For the first time in history, the United States Speaker of the House has been ousted from his chair.
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
Whoa, joining us now with all that and much more is our full Spotlight Politics team. Heather Sharon, Paris Schutz, and Amanda is back at the table. Welcome back. We missed you.
Thanks. Missed you guys too.
So for the first time in history, sitting Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, he's lost the gavel. Heather, what happened?
Well, he lost the confidence of the right wing of the Republican Party, which, as we all know, is very right wing. Now, to begin with, he only had a 5-vote majority. He had 8 people vote against him, so that means he's out of the chair for the first time, as you said, in U.S. history. And I feel obligated to note that former Speaker Nancy Pelosi also had a 5-vote majority in the last Congress, and, well, she kept her seat, didn't she?
Kept her ducks in a row.
Yes.
In this instance, obviously, a lot of Republicans, not sure how many, but a lot of Republicans voted against their own speaker. The vote to elect him, we all remember, that was a bit of a nightmare, too. Paris, will we see something like that again to replace
that was
McCarthy?
a never-ending vote. It's really hard to see what happens now with Republicans. Who is going to be a consensus candidate to keep this very narrow and fractured and broken caucus together? And then, if someone does emerge, then what are they supposed to do to keep their job? Are they supposed to just careen toward another government shutdown? Because what Matt Gaetz is saying here, we don't want to keep voting for these continuing resolutions to fund government, and that's going to come up again in November. So if a new speaker's elected and they don't just vote to shut the government down, then they're going to get vacated too. I mean, who would even want this job? But it's very hard to see who could be a consensus candidate and how this Congress is even going to be functional going forward.
Well, right. I mean, Heather, you said that he lost the far right of the party, but I think we could arguably say he never had them in the first place. I mean, it was this...
One person, he agreed to having one person vote to vacate, Matt Gaetz,
which is
when he used to be a majority.
Happened. Exactly. That's part of the rules. It's the rules that he agreed to in order to ascend to this position. And there was a lot of talk at the time, and he wasn't worried about it. And oh, wait, look what happened.
Amanda, politically, does this help the Democrats that the GOP appears to be a circus?
You know, I guess I would say, first of all, it certainly doesn't help the United States of America, period. It further takes the country into more dysfunction, as Paris spoke about. We were already sort of careening toward this lack of budget. And what is that going to mean? A government shutdown? Does this set America up for more of that? What does it say to the world when things are in such disarray? Might it help the Democrats? Potentially, and especially as we have elections, of course, on the horizon. But so many of these districts are so gerrymandered, which is why you have a very polarized Congress, which is why you have very far progressives having a better time getting elected and these super hard right conservatives. So you're not really going to see, I think, any sort of major shift in any of that long term. Does it give Democrats a bump right now? Perhaps. But again, look back to some of the things that are going to be on the table. Funding for the Ukraine war and what is going on with Russia. I mean, all of this remains up in the air, and in fact, even more so than it was, so tenuous ground getting worse.
Okay, so shifting to the migrant crisis that's happening right here, of course, Governor J.B. Pritzker sending a letter to President Biden saying that Illinois is in a, quote, untenable situation with the influx of migrants here. Both the mayor and the governor saying that they were on a call with the White House over the weekend. Heather, what are they asking for?
Cold, hard cash. That is the biggest
Show me that money.
Yes. So the state says that it has spent nearly $330 million caring for the migrants. The city has spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million. Federal reimbursement has only been a fraction of that, less than $50 million, closer to $40 million when all is said and done. So they need help. They also want more help in sort of figuring out when people are arriving in Chicago. And they're concerned that the city is already overwhelmed and it's about to go from bad to worse because the governor's office is warning people that they're expecting 20 to 25 buses per day to arrive in Chicago, which is more than double what has arrived in the past week, which has already forced the city to house nearly 3,000 people in police stations and airports across the city. There is simply just no infrastructure to care for these people who are coming here sick and hungry and in desperate need of help because they've been traumatized after a long journey. There's really this is just a break glass in case of emergency plea for help. And because both the governor and the mayor believe Chicago is being targeted by Texas Governor Greg Abbott because Chicago was selected to host the 2024 Democratic National Convention, which makes Chicago a good way to stick it in President Joe Biden's ear.
Yeah, it is disturbing. You can't drive by a police station or in the city of Chicago without seeing people living outside of them. Amanda, can the state do more, as Alderman Ramirez-Rosa posted to X, formerly known as Twitter?
So I think this is getting into a very difficult position for Governor Pritzker. We've seen this face-off between the governor and the mayor, even though they're trying to say, oh, we get along and sort of put on their happy faces. The issue being that, as he tried to make a note of in this letter, that this is just too big a problem for a city or a state to handle. The magnitude of it is past that which Illinois can take on, which is where there is this demand for money and for coordination. There's nothing that Illinois can do to demand that Texas cooperate, particularly when there is this political play going on. Again, I early on in this crisis spoke with folks from Texas who said, by the way, Illinois is now seeing a little bit of what we face along the border all the time, which is where we have likewise been calling for sort of a different plea for federal government to interference, but this is showing a little bit the liberal-leaning cities and states what is going on elsewhere. So can the state do more? Yes, but Illinois doesn't have that sort of cash. Look back to when the budget passed, there was a big fight over health care for undocumented immigrants who are already living in the state of Illinois in a lack of support because of lack of means in the budget to care for them. There just isn't the cash.
Paris, a meeting with city officials in Pilsen got heated over the 400 migrants who are heading there. What is the argument in that community?
Well, yeah, this just underscores how difficult it is to find temporary shelter in any neighborhood for any migrants. Pilsen, considered one of the hearts of the Latino community in the city of Chicago, and there's pushback there. And really, it's the same thing that you hear everywhere. Well, we want to be humanitarian, we want to help people, but what about money for our crumbling infrastructure? What about money for our schools? What about money for property tax relief? What about money for our parks? And it also underscores the fact that it doesn't really come down to the black community versus the Latino community. What it comes down to is the folks that are permanent residents here and the folks that are new arrivals here, asylum seekers and permanent residents, saying you're spending $30 million potentially on 10 cities, the state saying it spent $300 million. That was money that we could have used for these other things. So again,
pick a cause, healthcare,
schools,
housing,
homelessness.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just going to be so difficult to find a spot.
On the notion of those controversial tent shelters, Heather, what is the status of those?
Well, we are still waiting to hear from the mayor's office where they will be located. There is a good deal of disagreement within the progressive wing of the city council about whether they should be built at all. The mayor has been consistently telling his allies, we don't have any other options. So it is going to get cool this weekend. It is not going to drop below freezing, but I would imagine that conditions are about to get significantly worse for the people forced to live at the police stations and outside the police stations. And the mayor's office is clearly aware that that clock is ticking, and if it's not this, which they say is a bad option, give them any other bad option, and they say they would consider it.
All of them, it sounds like, aren't that good. So shifting to politics a little bit, Alderman Ray Lopez announcing that he's running against Congressman Chuy Garcia in the Democratic primary. Heather, let's talk about him a little bit. He talks like a Republican but runs like a Democrat.
So he is one of the most conservative members of the city council. He was probably former Alderman Ed Burke's closest ally on the city council. He is consistently somebody who has advocated for the police union. He's also a leading voice in wanting the city to scale back its protections for undocumented immigrants. He sees that as sort of an anti-crime measure, while other people say he's sort of splitting the Latino community against itself. It's important to note that he ran for Congress once before against Chuy Garcia and dropped out, and ran for mayor and then dropped out. He endorsed Paul Vallis, who of course did not win.
Paris, talk about Chuy's base of support. That's going to be hard to beat, right?
Chuy's built himself a pretty big political operation there on the Southwest side, not just the Latino community, progressives, unions, the Chicago Teachers Union. Seems that his ideology is a little more consistent with residents there, at least maybe a small majority of residents. But maybe Lopez is thinking, well, what if Chuy doesn't want to run again? Chuy had a tragedy in his family. He hasn't indicated that he's going to do anything other than run and try and keep that seat. There are important issues that he has to deal with. Ray Lopez also has used this kind of, rightward image to garner lots of national TV appearances for himself. This might help in that strategy, knowing that he's going to be a candidate, and he's certainly not shy about promoting those TV appearances.
Well, and that new district does go into the suburbs where Garcia might not have those same connections and built-in bases of support, and perhaps that more conservative leaning stance could give a boost. That said, if you live in one of these suburban areas, you probably know who Chuy Garcia is from his having run for mayor, being a congressperson. The likelihood that Lopez has any real name recognition there, and it's not like he's got great fundraising in the past, that makes it a very uphill battle.
You're right. It's a very odd district since the redistricting. So you've got parts of Elmhurst now, represented here. Elmhurst maybe not the most progressive bastion, although probably bluer than it used to be. So maybe a message of tough on crime, and tough on migrants works in those parts of the district.
Presenting a challenge there. So let's briefly talk about the new police superintendent, Larry Snelling. Talked about using technology to help with crime, but the mayor ran on eliminating the ShotSpotter technology. Paris Johnson renewed that contract because his hands were tied. What do you think he will do when his hands aren't tied?
Well, the police superintendent, Larry Snelling, has publicly said he supports ShotSpotter. He thinks it saves lives. ShotSpotter, that technology that automatically detects what appears to be gunshots, so police can be deployed there. And critics say it detects other things, and it wrongly leads police on the chase. But supporters say
a waste of money.
And it's a waste of money. But supporters say no. The ShotSpotter itself has said it works 97% of the time. I mean, I don't think we've really digged into the truth.
Though they've never really given the numbers on that.
So the key is Snelling has said Brandon Johnson is a mayor that listens. Will Brandon Johnson listen to Larry Snelling on this? Is this an argument Snelling's going to win, or is this one that he might concede to Johnson? Will Johnson concede to Snelling? I think it's an open question. What do you think?
Well, we'll see a little bit if there's more money in the budget next week for ShotSpotter. That's something that I'll be watching really closely. But I think that Johnson's in a little bit of a pickle with this, because this was a key promise that he made while he was on the campaign trail. And it's not just that ShotSpotter might not be effective, but that Black and Latino advocates believe that it contributes to the over-policing of their communities, and that exposes them to more police-related violence, and it is going to be a very hard sell for Johnson to sort of walk that back.
It'll be fun to talk about after that budget proposal is released next week. All right, that's Spotlight. Thanks, team. Heather, Paris, Amanda.
Thank you.
And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10 for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. We'll be examining the impact of the 15,000 migrants on Chicago's Black and Latino communities. And meet Academy Award winner Matthew Cherry and hear about his new animated series, Young Love. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.